Morning to you. Welcome to Thursday's Thoughts. Are you all coping with the new lockdown? I suppose we might be used to it by now, but still takes its toll, I'm sure. For me, having a routine is helpful. It's a bit like when I initially retired and I wondered what I was going to do with my time. And, well, I soon found out. God didn't let me rest on my laurels too long, and I thank him for that. When I was in Australia a couple of years ago, I came across a statue, and it was a very realistic one. It was a figure lying on a bench, covered in a blanket. In fact, it was so realistic that when it was first installed, the Sydney police had many calls reporting a man lying on a bench with no sign of life. His whole body is covered in a blanket, and the only part of the body that can be seen are the feet. And the feet are a giveaway as to who the figure is. They bear the wounds of the cross. The figure is Jesus portrayed as a homeless person, and it's a powerful image. And the sculptor was somebody called, he's a Canadian artist called Timothy Schmaltz, and apparently he's been creating Christian sculptures for almost 30 years, and the idea for a homeless Jesus was born when he was driving past people living on the streets in Toronto. And he describes the experience. He says, "I found myself shocked. There was one person in particular who was completely covered up in a blanket. There was something haunting about that, this fragile human form in stark contrast to all the busyness surrounding them. And I just felt that I saw Jesus. I couldn't let go of thinking that I'd just witnessed Jesus. So I went back to my studio, and about a week later I thought maybe I could create a sculpture that would make other people have that experience." And that was Timothy Schmaltz speaking. And it resulted in the first homeless Jesus in Toronto. And since then, the homeless Jesus has taken on a life of its own. And there are statues of it around the world. And it's becoming almost a movement, more than just a sculpture. The fact that the face of the statue is deliberately concealed means that everyone can connect and identify with the Jesus it portrays. And it's intended to be a visual translation of Matthew 25. In that chapter of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus likens himself to a homeless person to teach us about the need for compassion. If you look at Matthew chapter 25, verses 34 and 36, it'll give you a whole list of vulnerable people. And it reveals the point that that Jesus reveals himself whenever you've helped the least, you've done that to him. The sculpture reveals almost at the end of looking at it that it is Jesus, because at first you see it's just a statue of a homeless person, but then when you get closer you realize it's Jesus. And a few years ago I'd been to watch Wolves play, as is my wont, and I walked after the match with the crowd, and if you know Wolverhampton, you will know that there's a subway underneath the ring road that connects the Wolves ground to the city centre. And it's in that subway that people who are homeless often sit, sheltering from the cold and hoping that the thousands of football supporters that go through the subway might spare some change for them. And as I got halfway through the subway, I could see and hear at the other end 3 men verbally abusing and spitting at a homeless man sat on the ground. And my first response was, in my head and in my heart, imagining myself pushing through the crowds to get to where this was taking place, to defend the man in whatever needed doing. But I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And it was what I should have done, but I didn't. For fear? I don't know. When I got to the end of the subway, the abusers had left, and there were some people gathered around the homeless man to check that he was okay. And that scene that I'd witnessed carried with me all the way home. I thought about it, and it haunted me. It wouldn't leave me. And I berated myself for not having the courage of my convictions, not having faith enough to do what I needed to do. I was being Peter, in a sense. I was denying Christ. I realized so deeply and painfully that I'd missed an opportunity to help Jesus in the guise of this homeless man. And it wouldn't let me go. And the only thing that came out of this was that it prompted me to write a song called Christ in the Subway, which when I play with my two dear friends as the group Annam Chorus, we play in concert and I tell this story. And the only hope that I have is that it encourages others to have the courage to act as I should have done. Because it talks about the contradiction between us being in church and praising God, but walking past those in need outside on the streets. And we might all have stories about recognizing Jesus in the vulnerable, the broken, the homeless, the sick, the thirsty. But we need to move beyond the recognition to an active response. Because whatever we do for the least, we do for Jesus. Amen. And I'll speak to you again on Monday. Look after yourselves. Keep those routines going. That'll keep your mental health intact. And I'll speak to you soon. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.